I've had a lot of people ask me my opinion on GamerGate 2, as much has been made of GamerGate in the 10 years since it happened, but little understanding has been gleaned from it. These are my thoughts. While it started from a small and personal affair, it revealed a set of cultural fracture lines which broke apart into warring factions, which were of course much greater than any one individual. To say that Zoe Quinn was responsible for GamerGate is to say that Franz Ferdinand was responsible for World War I. The issue has been caused by a parasitic class of woke activists who had infiltrated the institutions of the industry and had set about reshaping it to fit their ideological agenda. Without relitigating the numerous problems of modern progressive ideology, this class of activists despise straight white men and take pride in degrading and immiserating them. Where they can't humiliate men of European descent, they actively marginalise and ostracise them under the rubric of inclusion. This is the sole focus of their activism and has been for decades now. They are proud of it, they proclaim it, and they have achieved it. This is, of course, a form of racism and sexism. Most people are not in favour of racial or sexual discrimination when it is carried out with this kind of malignant attitude. People will happily consent to having gender-segregated bathrooms or accurate racial representation in movies because those things are done for the good of the subject itself. It is an unwelcome imposition to allow men into women's bathrooms or to have a movie portrayal of a famous historical figure not be accurately representative. However, that is not why woke activists discriminate. They discriminate out of malice. It is not that straight white men are not welcome to become woke activists either. They absolutely are, but what this means is to take upon oneself the yoke of privilege, in which they are to receive lower status and recognition in penance for being straight white men and the alleged natural advantages that this brings over women, people of colour, or homosexuals. Whether such advantages exist is highly questionable, especially when compared to the kind of men that tend to join the woke coalition, but these men are content to accept their moral inferiority and self-abnegation as the ritual humiliation which allows them to take their place at the bottom of the hierarchy of the woke tribe. This door swings both ways. Anyone who fits the race, gender or sexuality hierarchy can also be expelled for insufficient commitment to hating white men. This identity caste system is not something that liberal-minded people feel like participating in. In fact, it is repugnant to them. Most people hold a much more egalitarian view of personal interactions and feel that they should treat others as they themselves wish to be treated. Most feel that it is a person's merit that should be rewarded, and the way they act towards others is the appropriate metric by which to make character judgments. It is the imposition of the identity caste system on a group of people who did not wish to participate in it that is the root cause of GamerGate. In August 2014, a series of articles were published by the parasite activist class which attacked the dissidents in the only way they knew how, through their identity, which was interpreted as a kind of slave identity in which pathetic, weaselly, straight white male gamers were incapable of grasping the propitious moment in which they found themselves to become beacons of progress for this new moral order. And thus began a guerrilla war between the activists and the dissidents, with the activists occupying the institutions and seats of power, and the dissidents having a large base of disaffected gamers from which to draw aid and succour. The insurrection lasted for well over a year, but eventually petered out as other real-world events took precedence and further populist revolts erupted in other spheres of life. The gaming industry's revolt was not unique, it just happened first. However, GamerGate was not a success, and once the energy of the insurrection had faded, the woke activists still controlled the positions of influence and continued to further inject their ideology into the gaming industry. Now it is not uncommon to find games allowing people to choose unsuitable pronouns for their characters, or have game developers deliberately removing straight white men as the default or even as an option from modern video games. The inability to properly organise is why GamerGate was not successful, but also why it was able to persist. The large swathe of gamers who objected to the woke hegemony came from a variety of walks of life and political beliefs. Many simply wanted just to be left alone. However, The woke activists have a particular moral homogeneity and will not leave anything alone. They are on a moral crusade to bend the industry to their will, and they get paid to do it. Every day, they wake up, excited to advance their interests at the expense of yours, and have, like termites, eaten into the core of every major studio and influenced nearly every major production. Without a totemic axis around which to mount a coherent resistance against the paid activist class, which can present an alternative moral order which is also consistent and compelling, there appears to be no way for GamerGate to actually win. The best GamerGate supporters can do is wait for them to fail on their own. GamerGate was, fundamentally, a collection of liberals who were not happy with woke ideology because it flew in the face of their sensibilities. However, woke ideology comes out of liberalism and is deliberately attuned to its weaknesses, which is a subject I have covered at length elsewhere, and I will leave a link in the description if you would like to know more. Liberals are not in favour of racism, but refuse to attack what the woke activists see as established racial hierarchies, and so seem, from the woke perspective, content to live with last generation's racism. The woke activist has the upper hand over the liberal here, as liberals do believe in universal recognition of value, but are unwilling to restructure the world to achieve it, and believe that if we continue forward in a generally liberal way, we will eventually achieve this goal. The difference between the liberal and the woke activist, then, is merely in method, not in ends, and the woke activist has a vast amount of intellectual labour behind their organisation and subversion, whereas the liberal has been coasting along on the same doctrine since the 1960s. So it appears to me that any revival of GamerGate is doomed to fail. The desire to resist woke ideology is of course sensible, but the old-school liberalism of those in objection to it is essentially negative, and has no forward-facing plan for what ought to be done. The message, when it's boiled down to its most essential characteristic, is do nothing. Without this moral impetus to do one thing and not the other, the woke activist is able to fill this void with imperatives that fundamentally align with the end goals of liberalism, even if the means are repulsive. Diversity is good, says the liberal, therefore we shall force diversity, says the woke activist, to which the liberal can do little but wring their hands in protest. Liberal insurrectionists do not have a positive doctrine to advance, which is at the same time a contradiction of the woke ideal, and thereby cannot also be a continuity of it. To be left alone is not enough, because while you fight each defensive action against the woke incursion, the woke activists are in a constant state of advance, planting their flag over each new institution, until the insurrectionists are encircled, totally discredited, ostracised, and then treated like a pest to be exterminated. They have a moral order that they are seeking to bring into being, and you are the obstacle to it. They know who their friends are, they know who their clients are, and they know who their enemies are. You don't. The gamers did not have a plan to eject woke activists from the industry, but the woke activists do have a plan to eject you. They have spent the last 10 years working against you every single day. You haven't. And that's why you're losing.